The first time I noticed, Kiera was standing in our bedroom at 11:30 on a Tuesday night, sliding into a black dress I'd never seen before. The fabric caught the lamplight like expensive silk, and the cut suggested places I wasn't invited to. "Going somewhere?" I asked from the doorway, laptop still warm in my hands from debugging code for another client who thought IT consultants worked for free. She turned, and for just a moment, I caught something in her expression. Not guilt, exactly, but the careful blankness people wear when they're editing their truth in real time. "Just trying things on," she said, smoothing the dress over her hips. "You know how it is. Sometimes you need to dress for yourself." I nodded like that made perfect sense, even though she'd been married to me for 8 years and had never once tried on cocktail dresses at midnight for the therapeutic value. But I said nothing. In my line of work, you learn that the most interesting data comes from watching systems when they think nobody's monitoring them. The pattern started small. A new perfume that arrived without occasion. Gym sessions that stretched into evening hours, followed by showers that lasted longer than usual. Phone calls that ended abruptly when I entered rooms. "Self-care," she explained when I mentioned the changes. "I'm finally learning to put myself first. You should be happy for me." The word "finally" hung in the air like smoke, as if 8 years of joint bank accounts, shared mortgage payments, and my consistent 70-hour work weeks had been some elaborate form of oppression she was only now escaping. 3 weeks later, I heard the garage door at 2:17 in the morning. I lay in bed listening to the careful choreography of someone trying to be quiet. Keys placed gently on the counter, shoes carried rather than worn, the soft whisper of stockings against the staircase banister. She slipped into bed like a ghost, smelling of wine and something else. Something that wasn't our house, our soap, our life. "Good conference?" I whispered. She murmured, already turning away. "Ran late. You know how these strategy sessions go." I did know how strategy sessions went. I'd attended plenty. They typically ended by 9, followed by obligatory drinks that wrapped up by 11. They rarely involved the kind of careful makeup removal I could hear happening in our bathroom at 3 in the morning. But I said nothing. Instead, I opened my laptop and began what I do best: systematic observation. The credit card statements told their own story: charges at boutiques I'd never heard of, restaurant bills for 2 at places we'd never been together, a recurring charge for something called Radiance Wellness Spa that offered services I was apparently not invited to discuss. The amounts weren't massive. Kiera was too smart for that. But they were consistent, like a subscription to a life I wasn't part of. 200 here, 300 there, always just under the threshold that might trigger a conversation about our budget. I could have confronted her. Should have, probably. But there's something fascinating about watching a system corrupt itself in real time. Every lie creates new requirements for more lies. Every secret demands additional secrets to protect it. Eventually, the architecture becomes so complex that it collapses under its own weight. So, I decided to conduct an experiment. If Kiera was learning to put herself first, I could learn something about priorities too. I started with the small things: Netflix, Spotify, her subscription to that meditation app she'd discovered during her mindfulness journey. I canceled them quietly, one by one, timing the disconnections for when she'd be out during her increasingly frequent evening activities. "The streaming's down," she mentioned one Thursday, not looking up from her phone. "Weird," I said. "Must be a technical issue. I'll look into it." I never did. She never mentioned it again. The credit cards came next. I called the companies and explained that we were reviewing our financial situation, requesting temporary holds on additional cards while we reassessed our spending patterns. It was all perfectly legal. Both our names were on the accounts. Within a week, Kiera started paying for things in cash, lots of cash, which raised interesting questions about where someone in marketing for a mid-sized firm was acquiring that kind of liquid currency. "You seem happier lately," I mentioned one evening as she prepared for another late night at the office. She was wearing a red dress this time, something that hugged her in ways that suggested the intended audience wasn't her laptop screen. "I told you," she said, checking her reflection in the hallway mirror. Self-care, taking control of my own happiness instead of waiting for someone else to provide it. The implication was clear. I had been failing to provide happiness, and she'd found alternative sources. What she didn't realize was that I'd been tracking those sources with the methodical precision I usually reserved for debugging corrupted databases. Her calendar, which she thought was private, told a fascinating story. Appointments with vendors I'd never heard of. Meetings scheduled at times that didn't align with her official work schedule. Location data that placed her phone at addresses across town while she was supposedly in conference rooms downtown. The most interesting discovery was a recurring appointment every Tuesday and Thursday at something called Meridian Event Solutions. I looked them up. They didn't exist. The address led to a luxury hotel downtown, the kind of place that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask questions about the names on credit cards. I could have confronted her with the evidence, could have demanded explanations, scheduled marriage counseling, initiated the kind of dramatic conversations that end with tears and promises and temporary changes that fade within weeks. Instead, I did something that felt more honest. I stopped participating in the fiction that our marriage was something worth saving. The mortgage payment was due on the 15th. For the first time in 8 years, I paid only my half. When Kiera asked about the late notice, I explained that I was reassessing my financial priorities and learning to put myself first. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her calculating whether to escalate the situation or maintain the pretense that nothing fundamental had changed between us. "Fine," she said finally. "I can handle my own responsibilities." That's when things got interesting. Kiera's solution to her sudden financial obligations revealed layers of deception I hadn't anticipated. Within 3 days of the mortgage conversation, she'd arranged a meeting with our bank to discuss refinancing options. I knew this because I still received notifications on the joint account, and because Mrs. Patterson next door mentioned seeing a well-dressed man in a Tesla picking Kiera up for what she assumed was a business lunch. The man turned out to be Jasper Linton, a venture capitalist who specialized in what he called disruptive financial solutions, and what the rest of us called predatory lending with better marketing. I found his profile easily enough. He was the kind of person who maintained a robust social media presence, documenting his success with expensive restaurants and weekend trips to places that required passports. More importantly, he was recently divorced and apparently eager to demonstrate his continued relevance in the dating market through conspicuous consumption and association with younger women. Kiera, at 36, qualified as younger. She also qualified as married, but that seemed to be a detail they were both comfortable overlooking. The refinancing attempt was ambitious. Kiera had forged my signature on documents that would have restructured our mortgage to free up $60,000 in cash, ostensibly for home improvements and debt consolidation. The forgery was competent but not perfect. She'd missed the small flourish I always added to the final letter of my last name, a habit developed during years of signing contracts and purchase orders. I let the application proceed until the final verification stage, then contacted the bank to report the unauthorized signature. The conversation was brief and professional. The application was frozen pending investigation. Kiera's access to our joint accounts was temporarily suspended. The bank's fraud department opened a file. That evening, she came home earlier than usual, her face carrying the particular tightness that comes from discovering that systems you thought you controlled have been controlled by someone else. "There's been some kind of mistake with the bank," she said, setting her purse down with more force than necessary. "They're saying there's a problem with the refinancing paperwork." "What kind of problem?" I asked, not looking up from my laptop. "Something about signatures not matching. It's ridiculous. I'll straighten it out tomorrow." "I'm sure you will," I said. Banks are pretty thorough about that kind of thing, though. Fraud protection and all. She went very still. Fraud? Just standard procedure when signatures don't match official records. They have to investigate. Probably take a few weeks to sort out. I could hear her breathing change, becoming more shallow and controlled. She was calculating again, running scenarios, trying to determine how much I knew and how much I was guessing. Beck, she said carefully, if there's something you want to discuss, we should discuss it directly. This was her opening offer for negotiation. Acknowledge the situation, establish terms for how we'd handle the dissolution of our marriage, divide assets equitably, and maintain the civilized pretense that we were both reasonable adults who'd simply grown apart. I think we're discussing it perfectly well, I said. You're learning to handle your own responsibilities. I'm learning to protect my financial interests. It's very modern. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her recalibrating. The reasonable approach wasn't working. Time for a different strategy. You're being controlling, she said, her voice taking on the particular tone she used when she wanted to establish moral high ground. This is exactly the kind of behavior I've been trying to get away from. You can't just freeze our accounts because you're upset about me having a social life. I haven't frozen anything, I said truthfully. The bank froze things when they detected potential fraud. I just reported what appeared to be an unauthorized signature. Seemed like the responsible thing to do. You know that was my signature. Do I? It didn't look like your signature to me. Of course, I've only been seeing your signature for 8 years. Maybe it's evolved. She was trapped between admitting she'd forged my name and maintaining the fiction that she'd done nothing wrong. Either choice led to conversations she didn't want to have. This is insane, she said finally. You're sabotaging our marriage over nothing. I'm not sabotaging anything. I'm just not subsidizing your self-discovery anymore. There's a difference. That night, she made 3 phone calls from the backyard, speaking in the low, urgent tones people use when their carefully constructed plans start unraveling. I couldn't hear the specific words, but the rhythm was familiar, the same cadence she used when explaining to clients why their marketing campaigns weren't producing expected results. The next morning, I found a business card on the kitchen counter. Morrison and Associates Family Law. She'd positioned it carefully, like a chess piece being moved into position. Just exploring options, she said when she noticed me looking at it, making sure I understand my rights. Smart, I said. Everyone should understand their rights. What she didn't understand was that I'd been exploring my own options for weeks. Our prenuptial agreement, which we'd signed during the optimistic early days of our relationship, contained several clauses that seemed quaint at the time, but had become remarkably relevant. Section 4.3 specified that unilateral attempts to modify joint financial obligations would trigger a temporary separation of assets pending resolution. Section 6.1 established that intentional misrepresentation of financial information would void spousal support obligations. Section 7.2 required full disclosure of all income sources during any divorce proceedings. Kiera had apparently forgotten about these details, or assumed they were the kind of legal boilerplate that never actually gets enforced. She was about to discover that contracts, like databases, perform exactly as written. I spent the morning reviewing our joint accounts and documenting the patterns I'd been observing. Cash withdrawals that coincided with her evening appointments, charges that appeared on our statements but corresponded to activities I wasn't invited to join, transfers to accounts I couldn't identify, routed through services that specialized in financial privacy. The most interesting discovery was a series of payments to something called Meridian Event Solutions, the same fictional company that appeared on her private calendar. The payments were substantial and regular, suggesting this wasn't just about hotel rooms and expensive dinners. I ran a deeper search on the company name and found incorporation papers filed 6 weeks earlier. The registered agent was Jasper Linton. The business purpose was listed as consulting and event coordination. The address was a post office box downtown. Kiera and her venture capitalist friend weren't just having an affair. They were running some kind of business together, using our joint accounts to fund whatever they were planning. The hotel meetings weren't romantic interludes. They were business meetings for a venture I was unwittingly financing. That evening, Kiera came home with flowers and a bottle of wine, her demeanor suddenly warm and conciliatory. "I've been thinking," she said, arranging the flowers in a vase with careful attention to their positioning. "Maybe we've both been under too much stress lately. Maybe we should plan a vacation. Get away from all this financial nonsense and remember why we fell in love." It was a competent performance, delivered with the practiced sincerity she used in client presentations. But I'd seen her real face now, the calculating expression she wore when she thought nobody was watching. Everything else was just marketing. "That sounds nice," I said. "Where were you thinking?" "Somewhere tropical. Expensive. We could use the equity from the refinancing." "About that," I said. "I don't think the refinancing is going to work out." Her smile never wavered, but something shifted behind her eyes. "Why not?" "The bank called today. They're referring the signature issue to their fraud investigation unit. Apparently, when signatures don't match, they take it pretty seriously. Could take months to resolve." The flowers fell from her hands, scattering across the kitchen counter like evidence of something beautiful that had just been destroyed. The fraud investigation moved with the inexorable momentum of institutional bureaucracy. Within a week, our joint accounts were completely frozen pending resolution. Our credit cards were suspended. The mortgage company received notification that our refinancing application was under investigation for potential document fraud. Kiera handled this development with the kind of controlled panic that comes from watching carefully laid plans disintegrate in real time. "This is ridiculous," she announced over breakfast, waving a letter from the bank's legal department. "They're treating us like criminals over a paperwork error." "Paperwork errors can be expensive," I said, buttering my toast with deliberate calm, "especially when they involve forged signatures on loan documents. I didn't forge anything." "I know. That's what makes it so puzzling. If you didn't forge my signature and I didn't sign those papers, then someone else must have. Identity theft, probably. We should file a police report." She went very still. Filing a police report would mean official documentation, handwriting analysis, sworn statements about who had access to our personal information. It would mean investigations that extended beyond bank fraud departments into actual criminal territory. "Let's not involve the police yet," she said carefully. "Maybe we can work this out with the bank directly." "Whatever you think is best," I said. "You're handling the situation." What she was actually handling was a cascade of problems that grew more complex each day. Without access to our joint accounts, she was funding her lifestyle entirely through cash, which raised obvious questions about where that cash was coming from. Her evening appointments continued, but now they had a desperate quality, like someone trying to solve an equation with too many variables. I knew this because I'd started following her. It wasn't difficult. Kiera had never been particularly surveillance conscious, and her patterns were predictable. Tuesday and Thursday evenings, she drove downtown to the Meridian Hotel. She parked in the same section of the garage, took the elevator to the same floor, and spent approximately 2 hours in meetings that weren't listed on any official calendar. On Thursday, I positioned myself in the hotel lobby with a newspaper and a clear view of the elevator bank. At 8:15, Kiera emerged looking flustered and angry. 2 minutes later, Jasper Linton followed, checking his phone with the kind of aggressive finger movements that suggested he wasn't happy with whatever he was reading. They didn't leave together, but their body language told a clear story. Whatever business they were conducting wasn't going well. I waited until they were both gone, then approached the front desk with the kind of confident authority that comes from years of dealing with client emergencies. "I'm supposed to meet with the Meridian Event Solutions Group," I told the desk clerk, But I think I missed them. Were they in their usual conference room? Room 847, she said automatically. But I think they just left. Thanks, I'll try to catch them next week. Room 847 wasn't a conference room. It was a suite, the kind of space that rented for $500 a night and came with amenities designed for privacy rather than productivity. More importantly, it was registered under Jasper's name and had been booked every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 2 months. The pattern was becoming clear. Kiera and Jasper weren't just having an affair. They were running some kind of operation that required regular meetings, substantial cash flow, and absolute discretion. The frozen bank accounts hadn't just inconvenienced Kiera's personal life, they disrupted whatever business arrangement she and Jasper had established. That weekend, while Kiera was at what she claimed was a mandatory team-building retreat, I conducted a thorough search of our house. I wasn't looking for love letters or evidence of romantic betrayal. I was looking for business documents, financial records, anything that would explain what Meridian Event Solutions actually did. I found it in her home office, hidden inside a folder labeled Personal Development Workshops. Bank statements for accounts I'd never seen. Incorporation papers for shell companies with names like Strategic Wellness Initiatives and Lifestyle Optimization Partners. Contracts for services that sounded legitimate but had payment structures that made no sense. The most revealing document was a partnership agreement between Kiera and Jasper, dated 6 months earlier. According to the contract, they were operating what they called a high-end lifestyle consulting service for wealthy clients seeking discrete personal optimization solutions. In plainer language, they were running an escort service. Not the kind that advertised in the back pages of alternative newspapers, but the sophisticated version that catered to venture capitalists and pharmaceutical executives who wanted companionship for business dinners and weekend conferences. The women were recruited through wellness spas and personal development seminars. The clients were acquired through Jasper's professional network. The operation was structured as a consulting business to avoid legal complications. Kiera wasn't just cheating on me. She was using our joint accounts to fund a business that was probably illegal and definitely lucrative. The hotel meetings weren't romantic interludes. They were business reviews where she and Jasper coordinated schedules, managed finances, and planned expansion into new markets. The frozen bank accounts had crippled their cash flow at a critical moment. According to the documents, they'd been preparing to lease office space and hire additional staff. Instead, they were scrambling to meet existing obligations with whatever liquid assets they could access. I photographed everything, uploaded the images to a secure cloud account, and returned the documents to their original positions. Then, I sat in my kitchen and considered my options. I could report them to the authorities. The business was almost certainly operating outside legal boundaries, and the financial arrangements would interest both the IRS and local law enforcement. But prosecution would take years and might not result in meaningful consequences. I could confront Kiera directly, demand explanations, threaten exposure, negotiate some kind of settlement that would end our marriage with minimal financial damage to myself. But that would give her time to destroy evidence and restructure their operation. Or I could do something more surgical, something that would dismantle their business, destroy their professional relationships, and leave them both facing the kind of social and financial consequences that tend to be more devastating than legal prosecution. I chose the surgical option. Monday morning, I sent an anonymous email to the compliance department at Jasper's venture capital firm. The message was brief and professional. You may want to review Mr. Linton's recent business activities and financial arrangements. Attached documentation may be relevant to your fiduciary responsibilities. I included selected pages from the partnership agreement, bank statements showing transfers between Jasper's personal accounts and the shell companies, and hotel receipts that established a pattern of regular meetings with women who weren't his business associates. Tuesday afternoon, Jasper's access to his company accounts was suspended pending an internal investigation. By Thursday, The investigation had expanded to include external auditors and legal counsel. By Friday, Jasper was on administrative leave while his firm reviewed what they diplomatically called potential conflicts of interest. Kiera didn't know about any of this yet. She was still operating under the assumption that their problems were temporary, that the bank issues would resolve themselves, that their business could weather a brief financial interruption. She was about to discover that some interruptions are permanent. The call came at 7:30 on a Monday morning while Kiera was in the shower preparing for what she'd described as a crucial client presentation. I answered our home phone, a landline we'd kept for emergencies and telemarketers, and found myself speaking with someone from her company's human resources department. "Mrs. Darren isn't available right now," I said. "Can I take a message?" "This is regarding some financial irregularities that have come to our attention," the voice said, crisp and professional. "We need to speak with her immediately about her expense reports and client billing practices." "I'll let her know," I said, and hung up. When Kiera emerged from the bathroom, I delivered the message with the same neutral tone I used for reporting software bugs to clients. She went pale, then tried to cover it with irritation. "Probably just some accounting confusion," she said, but her hands were shaking as she applied her makeup. "You know how these corporate bureaucrats are. They see one unusual expense and panic." She left for work 20 minutes early, driving with the kind of aggressive urgency that suggested she knew exactly what kind of accounting confusion was waiting for her. I spent the morning researching Kiera's company and their expense reporting procedures. Like most mid-sized firms, they had strict policies about client entertainment, travel reimbursements, and business development activities. Employees were required to provide detailed documentation for any expenses over $50, including receipts, client names, and business justifications. More importantly, they had recently implemented new compliance software that cross-referenced expense reports with actual client billing records. If someone claimed to be entertaining a client who wasn't being billed for services, the system flagged the discrepancy for review. I suspected Kiera had been using company expense accounts to fund some of her Meridian Event Solutions activities, disguising personal expenses as business development. The compliance software had probably detected the pattern and triggered an automatic review. My suspicion was confirmed when she called me at 11:30, her voice tight with controlled panic. "I need you to do something for me," she said without preamble. "Remember that dinner we had at Chez Laurent 2 months ago? The one where we met your client from the pharmaceutical company?" We'd never had dinner at Chez Laurent. I'd never had a client from a pharmaceutical company. She was asking me to provide false documentation for an expense report that was probably under investigation. "I don't remember that dinner," I said. "Beck, please, this is important. I just need you to confirm that we had a business dinner there. It's a simple favor. I can't confirm something that didn't happen." There was a long silence, filled with the kind of static that comes from someone trying to control their breathing over a phone connection. "Fine," she said finally. "I'll handle it myself." She handled it by not coming home that night. I received a text at 9 p.m. "Staying downtown tonight. Work crisis. Don't wait up." The message had the economical phrasing of someone who was too stressed to maintain normal social pretenses. The next morning, I learned what kind of work crisis she was managing. Mrs. Patterson mentioned seeing Kiera's car parked outside the Meridian Hotel overnight. The security guard at my office building, who moonlighted as a bartender downtown, mentioned seeing her in the hotel bar looking pretty upset and making intense phone calls. She was in crisis management mode, probably trying to coordinate with Jasper about how to handle their respective professional problems. What they didn't realize was that their problems were connected in ways that made coordination impossible. Jasper's venture capital firm had discovered his involvement with Meridian Event Solutions and was treating it as a potential liability issue. They were particularly concerned about the use of company resources to facilitate what appeared to be an escort service, and the possibility that clients had been exposed to legal or reputational risks. Kiera's marketing firm had discovered expense report irregularities that suggested she'd been using company funds for unauthorized purposes. They were particularly concerned about the potential for client billing fraud and the possibility that she'd been operating a side business using company resources. Neither firm knew about the connection between their respective problem employees, but both were conducting investigations that would inevitably reveal the shared business relationship. Wednesday afternoon, Kiera came home looking like someone who'd been awake for 36 hours straight. Her makeup was applied with the kind of careful precision that suggested she was trying to maintain professional appearances despite personal chaos. "We need to talk," she said, setting her purse down with deliberate care. "Okay," I said. "I'm in some trouble at work. There are questions about my expense reports, and I might need a lawyer." "What kind of questions?" "The kind that could affect my job, and our finances, and our future." She was offering partial honesty as a negotiating position, hoping that limited disclosure would satisfy my curiosity and secure my cooperation. It was a reasonable strategy for someone who didn't realize how much I already knew. "What do you need from me?" I asked. "I need you to stop the bank investigation. Call them and tell them you made a mistake about the signature. Tell them you signed the papers and forgot about it." "But I didn't sign the papers." "I know that. You know that. But the bank doesn't need to know that." She was asking me to commit fraud to cover up her fraud, creating a conspiracy that would implicate us both in whatever legal consequences emerged from her business activities. "That seems risky," I said. "Riskier than losing our house? Because that's what's going to happen if this bank thing doesn't get resolved. I can't make the mortgage payments without access to our accounts, and I can't get access to our accounts while they're investigating the signature issue." "Maybe you could ask your business partner for help," I said. She went very still. "What business partner?" "Jasper Linton, Meridian Event Solutions, the partnership agreement in your office filing cabinet." The color drained from her face with the efficiency of water leaving a bathtub. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her recalculating everything she thought she knew about our situation. "How long have you known?" she asked finally. "Long enough." "And you've just been sitting here watching me dig myself deeper?" "You seem to be handling your own responsibilities. I didn't want to interfere with your self-discovery process." She laughed, but it was the kind of laugh that comes from recognizing the scope of a disaster rather than finding anything amusing. "You manipulative son of a—" She caught herself, probably remembering that she was in no position to claim moral high ground. "You could have stopped this weeks ago." "Stopped what? Your affair? Your business venture? Your expense report fraud? Which part was I supposed to stop?" "All of it. Any of it. Instead, you just sat there and let me destroy everything." "I didn't destroy anything," I said. "I just stopped paying for things." Thursday morning brought the kind of autumn rain that turns fallen leaves into slippery paste and makes everything look like a crime scene. Kiera left for work without speaking to me, her silence carrying the weight of someone who'd spent the night calculating damage and finding the numbers unacceptable. I knew her calculations were about to get worse. At 9:15, I received a call from Detective Morrison with the County Fraud Investigation Unit. The bank had escalated their investigation to law enforcement after discovering what they called a pattern of sophisticated financial manipulation involving multiple accounts and shell companies. "We'd like to schedule an interview," Detective Morrison said, his voice carrying the professional courtesy that police use when they're not sure whether you're a victim or a suspect. "Just to clarify some details about your financial accounts and recent transactions." "Of course," I said. "When would be convenient?" "This afternoon, if possible. We're trying to move quickly on this." I agreed to meet them at 2:00, then spent the morning organizing documents that would demonstrate my complete ignorance of Kiera's business activities. Bank statements showing my regular salary deposits and routine expenses. Email records showing my normal work communications with legitimate clients. calendar entries showing my whereabouts during the times when Meridian Event Solutions was conducting business. The interview lasted 90 minutes and covered everything from our marriage history to my knowledge of Kiera's professional activities. Detective Morrison was thorough but not hostile, treating me as a potential victim of identity theft rather than a co-conspirator in whatever crimes were under investigation. Your wife has been operating several business entities using your joint financial accounts, he explained, reviewing a folder thick with bank records and corporate filings. The businesses appear to be shells for activities that may violate state laws regarding prostitution and money laundering. I had no idea, I said truthfully. We believe you. The evidence suggests you were excluded from these activities and may have been a victim of financial fraud yourself. He showed me copies of the partnership agreements, business registrations, and financial transfers that documented Kiera and Jasper's operation. The scope was larger than I'd realized. They'd been running their service for almost a year, generating substantial revenue through a network of shell companies and offshore accounts. What happens now? I asked. We'll be making arrests soon. Your wife and her partner are facing charges for operating an illegal enterprise, money laundering, tax evasion, and fraud. You'll probably be called as a witness, but you're not a target of the investigation. I thanked him for his time and drove home through the rain, thinking about the conversation I'd be having with Kiera when she returned from what would probably be her last day of employment. She came home at 3:30, carrying a cardboard box and wearing the expression of someone who'd just watched their professional life disappear in real time. They fired me, she said, setting the box on the kitchen counter next to the flowers she'd brought home the week before, now wilted and brown. Terminated for cause, no severance, no references, no nothing. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it. Whatever else she'd done, losing a job was genuinely painful. No, you're not. You're probably celebrating. You got exactly what you wanted. What I wanted was a marriage based on honesty and mutual respect. This isn't what I wanted. She laughed bitterly. Honesty? You've been manipulating this situation for weeks. You knew about the business, you knew about Jasper, you knew about everything, and you just sat there watching me hang myself. I knew about your choices. I didn't make them for you. You could have talked to me. We could have worked something out. Like what? You were running an escort service using our joint bank accounts. What kind of conversation resolves that? She was quiet for a moment, staring at the cardboard box that contained the remnants of her professional life. It wasn't supposed to be permanent, she said finally. It was just supposed to be a way to make some money quickly. Jasper had the connections. I had the organizational skills. We thought we could run it for a year, save up enough to start something legitimate. And our marriage? I thought you wouldn't notice. You're always working, always distracted. I thought I could keep everything separate. You thought you could keep your escort service separate from our marriage? It wasn't an escort service. It was lifestyle consulting, high-end companionship for business functions. It was all perfectly legal. Apparently, the police disagree. She went very still. What police? Detective Morrison called this morning. They're investigating the financial irregularities. They wanted to interview me about our accounts and your business activities. What did you tell them? The truth, that I knew nothing about your business operations and had no involvement in any illegal activities. You threw me under the bus. I answered their questions honestly. The bus was already moving. She stared at me with something that might have been hatred or might have been respect for the thoroughness of my betrayal. They're going to arrest me, she said. Probably. And you're just going to let them. I don't see how I could stop them, even if I wanted to. You could have stopped all of this weeks ago. You could have talked to me, worked with me, helped me find a way out. Instead, you just sat there and watched me destroy everything. You made your choices. I just stopped subsidizing them. You destroyed my life. You destroyed your life. I just stopped paying for it. She picked up the cardboard box and walked toward the stairs, moving like someone carrying something much heavier than office supplies and personal photographs. "Where will you go?" I asked. "Jasper's place, assuming they haven't arrested him yet." "And if they have? Then I'll figure something else out. I've gotten pretty good at figuring things out on my own lately." She was gone within an hour, taking only what fit in her car and leaving behind 8 years of shared possessions that now felt like evidence of a life that had never really existed. I sat in our kitchen, my kitchen now, and listened to the rain against the windows. The house felt different already, lighter somehow, as if removing the weight of constant deception had improved the structural integrity of the building itself. At 6:30, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "They arrested Jasper an hour ago. I'm next. I hope you're happy." I wasn't happy, exactly, but I wasn't sad either. I felt the kind of calm satisfaction that comes from watching a complex system finally execute the way it was designed to work. Choices had consequences. Actions had results. The mathematics of cause and effect had played out with elegant precision. I deleted the text message and made myself dinner for one, eating slowly and enjoying the silence. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing the streets clean and preparing the ground for whatever would grow in the spaces that had been cleared. The account had settled, the books were balanced, and for the first time in months, I slept through the night without wondering what time someone would be coming home.